That's why they're called radiant rising rituals. But first thing is to take a deep breath and breathe consciously, because the quality of your breath is the quality of your life. So we all breathe involuntarily. You can't live without breathing. But when you breathe consciously, it opens up a lot of physiological, energetic, and spiritual benefits because you take in more prana or chi. There's different words for it, but prana, chi, ashe is life force energy that is travels on the breath.
Welcome back to Perspective Switch, where we discuss spirituality and self development. Today's guest is Dijon, the creator of Dharma Glow. And I am so excited for today's conversation because he's an amazing visual artist and he shows up to what he cares about and lives his life with purpose. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Lonnie.
Excitingly, we met in Austin, Texas, because we both took Ali Abdal's YouTube creators course. And that was such a beautiful and amazing experience. And I'm curious to see, where were you when we met? And then what has happened since we met the past couple weeks?
So I feel like I was in a good place when we met. I don't know if I remember telling you about like the whole Topo Chico story when I was coming out to Austin. I'll go through it really quickly. So
Yes.
when I was picking out the clothes to wear, I was deciding between a shirt that says "Everything as It Should Be," which is a lyric from one of my favorite bands, groups, and then a Topo Chico shirt. And I was like, you know what? I feel intuitively guided to wear this Topo Chico shirt. And then when I got to Austin, I had a sweatshirt on over it, but my Topo Chico shirt was underneath. And on my way to the PTYA event, I saw a thrift store off the highway that I just happened to glance and see. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to this thrift store. Like, I feel called. That's not something I do much anymore. I used to. I pulled in there, and when I opened the door, a woman walked by drinking a Topo Chico. And I was like, oh, that's a cool coincidence. And then as I was browsing, a woman came up to me that worked there and she said, "Are you thirsty? Would you like something to drink?" And I was like, "Sure." She was like, "All right, I'll grab you some water." And then she started walking away. And then she turned around and said, "Actually, would you like a Topo Chico?" And I was like, 100% yes. And to me, like, even though that's kind of a silly story, I feel like the universe is playful. And if you tune in to your intuitive sensibilities and just like follow the little pings you have about, okay, I'm going to go to this thrift store, or I'm going to go this place, or I'm going to talk to this person, then you get feedback that you're on the right path.
Yeah.
So my whole experience of being in Austin was like that, where I was meeting people like you and meeting other creators that were similar in the same way. Like, we all have different things we're interested in, but
Mhm.
we're all interested in creatively expressing ourselves and sharing something positive in the world. So I was in a good place then. I'd say I'm in an even better place now because it's energizing to be connected with people who accelerate your growth and inspire you in different ways. So, like Steven started or has been doing a Substack. So I also started a Substack. That's something I've been meaning to do. But then when I saw him doing it, I was like, I can do that
What
too. Right.
what is a Substack?
Substack is a blogging platform. It's like a cross between a newsletter and a blog.
Okay.
So I do a lot of things, as I'm sure you do as well. And a Substack is
Yeah.
a place for you to tell stories or share information about anything that you want. So I'll tell stories, but I'll also post links to my music or links to stuff I learned about Kundalini or having conscious relationships or YouTube videos that I made. It's just like I get to share it all there. I posted about it online on my social media for the first time and got someone to be a paid subscriber, which I feel like is also like a thumbs up from the universe. Like, keep going.
That's so beautiful. It's so inspiring too. I love getting to bounce ideas off of creators. I feel like I had a similar experience in Austin. One of the most memorable moments was I went for a run along the river, and then I decided that I was just gonna run as long as I felt like it, and then I was just gonna Uber back to my Airbnb. And so my Uber back to my Airbnb, the guy was listening to some podcast and they were talking about microdosing. So then I was like, "Oh, have you ever microdosed before?" And then we started talking about that, and we ended up having a really deep conversation and how he microdosed like a week before for the first time ever with his wife, and it was this really profound experience. And he was like, I haven't told anyone this because I guess he didn't feel comfortable sharing it. And it was just one of those, like, I am so grateful to be here. I am so grateful to have just like have this desire and this courage to just go after what I want. I saw this advertisement for a podcast summit in Miami in July. So it's literally a month from now. And yesterday I can be super spontaneous, a little bit impulsive, but I was like, I'm going. Bye. Because there's nothing that's more valuable than networking, and I
Right.
know you know that too. It's like it's valuable, and it's also the most fulfilling part of our journey is meeting people and really connecting with them. So then I just booked my plane tickets right before this podcast, and my favorite number is 27, and I love seeing it because I'm like, okay, all right, the universe is supporting me. And like my plane, I think it leaves at like 9:27, and then it was like there was another 27 in there, and I just really appreciated it and love it. But something else that I've thought a lot about recently is that the universe is gonna support me no matter what. So it's like I'm always gonna see 27s, which
Yeah.
is it's like I like wait for the sign, but really the universe is always there.
The universe is definitely always there, and I love that you took the plunge and did it. And I think the universe is always going to support you so long as you're following your internal guidance in the way that you clearly are.
I appreciate that, what you just said, because sometimes I guess I take value away from how much effort I put into following my heart. And I'm like, well, like, it doesn't matter what I do. The universe, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I feel like at this point in my life, I relate, and living another way doesn't even seem like a possibility anymore. But
Yeah.
it does take effort to learn how to live this way. And then when you occasionally, like that Uber driver who was meeting you on that frequency, is really refreshing.
Mhm.
But if someone doesn't meet you on that frequency for whatever reason, it's good to know that it's not personal, right? It's just like people will meet you on the at the level that they have met themselves or that they feel comfortable with. So not to like shut down if someone's not able to kind of like meet you where you're at.
So I actually put my notice in at my job about a week ago, and I put like a 1 month notice in, and then I might do contract work for them. So it's like I'm not like done. But it just got to this point of where like I tap into podcasting and I tap into creating, and like it lights me up and I'm just so excited, and no matter how tired I am, it really just brings so much life to me. And then like as I'm working at my job, I feel really drained, and it's something that I've been pushing myself through, but like I'm getting to the point where I can't push myself anymore. So I put that notice in, okay, I know where I'm getting with this. And so I told someone yesterday, and she when she was talking to me, she was like concerned, and she was like, "Well, like, have you thought about doing contract work, or have you thought about maybe you can work for 6 months and then like have vacation for 6 months?" And it's like all these things of like she was meeting me where she's at and
Right.
not being able to see like the bigger picture and the possibility of it. And it was really cool to get to this place of not taking things so personal, because I've always taken so much so personally, and like I let other people's opinions and beliefs bring me into theirs.
Yeah, I get it. It's a difficult thing to master. And I feel like the more intimate our relationship is with someone, then the easier it is to take what they say personally, right? Like
Yeah.
if someone on the street yells, "Hey, asshole," then you're just like, "Oh, that guy's drunk or something," or, he's
Yeah,
going through something. You don't personalize it. But then when somebody that we're in our family or that we're in a relationship with comes from that place, and they're like, "Me? Like, what did I do? Like, I'm a nice person." Like, all, and we go into all these things,
yeah,
but nothing really ever is personal. And for me, that's why it's so important to have these really long rising rituals that I do to kind of like center myself in the presence and fill myself up as much as possible so that I can have that like presence, but also
mhm,
like detachment from other people's experience because it's not my experience, that's their
yeah,
experience, right?
yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. Because I know that when I'm in my like, when I have taken the time to meditate and I've taken the time to journal and to really be with myself and to know what I want, then it's so easy to go out into the world and just be myself. But if I go days or weeks without really taking care of myself and listening to myself, it definitely gets very confusing. And I start kind of just picking up on what other people believe and think.
Yeah, I feel like it's spiritual hygiene, right? Like
Yeah.
people are not as familiar with spiritual hygiene as like other forms, but like we wouldn't go a week without showering and brushing your teeth, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend going a week without tuning into your inner landscape and meditating or doing breath work or yoga to kind of like cleanse out whatever's going on in there.
What is your morning what did you call it? Morning
Radiant rising
routine?
rituals is what I call
Okay.
them. So, first of all, I call them that because I think it sounds cooler. And I think, first of all, language is really important. In general, I feel like there's a lot of like death culture, death worship that's
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 interesting.
that's like
Wait, can you go into that
mainstream.
more?
Yeah. So, like, for instance, mourning is related to like mourning when someone dies, like mourning, right?
Okay,
As
yeah.
opposed to rising, like I'm rising when I wake up. So they have different energies. But also, when something's cool, people be like, "Oh, that's so sick," right?
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember what was the drink I saw somebody drinking. It was called like, what was it? Like death water? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know if it was death water. It was something like that, right? And um, I don't know if you've ever seen the experiments that Dr. Emoto did, the
Mhm.
Japanese scientist, researcher, and he put like different words on water, and the words, which is are connected to intentions, actually change the molecular structure of the water. So if we know that that's true, right? And we know that the body is like however percentage water, like why would you be drinking something that says death water or what? I don't think that's what it's called, but it's something like that. Like people think it's clever, but it's like why wouldn't we engineer and design our lives or environment to be the most vibrant and life enhancing possible?
Mhm.
It seems like a very simple thing. So, anyways, that was kind of a tangent, but that's why they're called radiant rising rituals. But first thing is to take a deep breath and breathe consciously because the quality of your breath is the quality of your life. So we all breathe involuntarily. You can't live without breathing. But when you breathe consciously, it opens up a lot of physiological, energetic, and spiritual benefits because you take in more prana or chi. There's different words for it, but prana, chi, ashe is life force energy that is travels on the breath. So, like if you're breathing shallowly, which you may be doing if you're feeling anxious or tense, you may be like not really breathing. But if you take a deep breath all the way down to your diaphragm, then you're actually bringing in more life force energy into your body. So, first thing is just taking a deep breath, at least one, hopefully a few, and expressing gratitude maybe internally, just because it starts to create a positive momentum. I meditate. I do Vedic meditation. So that's 20 minutes of meditation. And then I think it's really important to do some sort of movement for me, like whether it's yoga or I have a little rebounder, which is like a mini trampoline. I can jump on that or go for a walk. And then I take in either high vibrational media, but I also think it's really important to create before you consume. And I talked
Mhm.
about that in one of my most recent YouTube videos. But when we pick up our phone and start taking in information, you're like relaxing into a consumption state. And I feel
Mhm.
like the point of being a human being on earth is to be a conscious creator. Like
Yeah.
God, our source, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, is a creator. It created everything, right? So to be a creator is to be in alignment with that part of your nature. And the more consciousness you can bring to your creations, then the more godlike you are being. So I was actually just making a YouTube short about this, but what you create doesn't have to be a masterpiece, right? It's not like you have to produce some art that you're going to share with people. It can just be for the sake of creating it. It could be making your bed, which is creating order in your room, you know,
Mm.
or it could just be playing music just to be expressing from the inside out as opposed to taking things from the outside and bringing them in. So once I've done all that, then I'll usually have tea ceremony or drink cacao. I have a Chinese tea ceremony set and it's very ritualistic, you know, so I may like light some Palo Santo and do my Chinese tea ceremony and pull an oracle card or read some spiritual text. And that just helps me attune to a certain frequency. And I feel like by doing all of these things, especially consecutively, I'm like raising my vibration to a certain point. And then when it's at that point, then I can kind of like start my day and like hang glide down from there. Whereas if I just woke up and immediately look at Instagram, like I'm probably going to see something and go down a rabbit hole that's already pulling me down. Right.
Yeah.
So it's either starting your vibration at this place you've ascended to through these conscious choices that you could then glide down from, or starting your day already getting pulled down by some like toxic media. And then depending on where you start from, then when you go to interact with a person, maybe you have more or less patience, right, to
Mhm.
interface with them. And if you
Yeah.
have less patience, then maybe you're not available to have the type of conversation you had with that Uber driver, right? Because you're just not in that mind space, energetic space to really connect because you're like already in a contracted space. So those are some of the things I do. I usually like to take like a long time, like probably at least an hour, but preferably 2 hours before I'm starting to interact with people or doing like work with email. Like I like to have that time for myself.
When I wake up, and sometimes I'll look at my phone and maybe there's a message, and then I unconsciously look at it, and then I'm like, "Oh man, now I have to respond because if I don't do it now, I'm gonna forget." And it'll pull me down, like you said, into that rabbit hole. And it's like it sets up the energy of my day to be like that energy of just this like energetic attachment to like, "Oh, I gotta like catch up with stuff or like do this." Whereas if I wake up and I take presence with myself, and for example, this morning I went right to the gym, which is my favorite days, is when I get to go work out and move the energy in my body and
Mhm.
do something challenging, mentally challenging, physically challenging. I just feel really good the entire day. And I feel
Right.
like no matter what I do today, I'm happy and grateful because I feel good.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, the first thing we do when we wake up is so important.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
love getting in the body too. What kind of workouts do you like to do?
Today I went and lifted weights. I did leg day.
Oh,
And then I
leg day.
also yeah, leg day. And
Yeah,
then I did the Stairmaster. I did that for 20 minutes.
nice. I
Yeah.
just joined LA Fitness like a couple of weeks ago. So I've always enjoyed physical activity, but not specifically like going to the gym and lifting weights. But now I love it.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah.
because it's like the mindset of everyone in there is to improve themselves.
Mhm.
So the energy is good, and I can like listen to a podcast in its entirety or listen to an album in its entirety, which I really like doing. So it's cool.
Let's go back to Dharma Glow. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So I have been tuned into the yogic path for a while. And maybe if you're more unfamiliar with yoga, then people just assume yoga is just the physical postures, but the physical postures are just a larger part of the overall system of yoga. And yoga means union. So it basically, to me, means being in tune with the universe, right? So asana, which is the physical practice, is one way of being in tune. And when you're living in tune, then you are guided to live out your dharma, which is like the reason you were put on the earth, right? Like we're all put on the earth to be expressions of love, but we all have unique ways of expressing it. So when we are in our alignment, then we get guidance from the universe about how to best live out our dharma. And when we're doing that, we radiate it out. So the intention of Dharma Glow is to help people first align with their purpose, but then radiate it. So
Mm.
the stuff I talked about as far as centering myself and the way I try to consciously design my experience is aligning with Dharma, and then sharing about it on this podcast or throwing events or putting on YouTube videos or writing on Substack are all ways that I like communicate that energy and try to spread the whatever enlightenment I've tapped into, and to encourage people to reach for that themselves as well.
Is the definition of dharma, is it life purpose? Does it exactly translate?
Well, I believe it's a Sanskrit word, so I don't know if that's like the exact translation, but that's the way I take it. It's like if you are acting unconsciously and moving through the world without really being aware of the causes that you're creating and you're creating unconscious effects, that's
Yeah.
creating karma. But
Okay.
if you're moving consciously and with intention, then you're living in dharma. So you're either creating dharma or karma.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting.
Hmm.
So, because my next question was going to be, do you believe we have one life purpose? Or maybe it's not so much like this is our predetermined destiny, it's just this energy that we've come to bring and share?
Yeah, I do believe it's an energy. So I do believe we all have one purpose, which is to be an expression of love. So that's everyone's purpose to me. But how you express it is can be as varied as your interests are. It's more about the energy you're bringing to something than what you're doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
your grandmother can make you cookies that taste like there's love in them, right? Because the level of presence and care that she put into them made those cookies a vessel of love.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just bought some cookies from the store, those are a product that have been scientifically engineered to be the most delicious or addictive or whatever. So, like, the intention is coming from a different place. So, like, that's the difference. Like, the store bought cookies to me, depending on which brand you're buying, are like maybe not dharmic expressions, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas like something like perspective switch is, because I can feel it's very obvious that this is a passion of yours and you're like excited to share. Like whenever I've
Yeah.
heard you talk about it, there's a certain energy that's behind how you talk about it and how you show up. So to me, it's not about what someone's doing, it's about whether you can feel that underlying energy.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so much I want to talk about. I don't know what to say first. Okay. All right. First, I want to say it wasn't until recently when I realized that I spent a lot of my life wanting like one thing, like wanting to just know what to do and like kind of like asking and begging the universe like, "Hey, like what do I do with my life? What do I do? What do I do?" And then recently I mean, maybe recently, not recently, about a year ago, I started Perspective Switch. I realized that I decide what I want to do. It's like I feel into my heart and then I bring my heart's expression into the world. And then the universe backs me and guides me. And I think that was just so important for me on my journey because I was just expecting like one life purpose. Like, I'm just going to figure out this one thing and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And that's why I came here. But what I'm feeling now is that we have more co creation than just like being told how to show up in the world, like told by like a spirit guide or like our soul or something. Yeah. Do you have any input on that?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I think that people can choose to show up to their lives in whichever way they choose.
Yeah.
And some people prefer to be kind of told what to do or to follow a very specific framework for life.
Yeah.
And I'm not judging those people because the whole world needs different types of people to exist, right? Like
Mhm.
some people pick up the trash, some people innovate AI, like you need all spectrums of society to exist. And for people like us, I think we're much more interested in exploring our internal landscape and acting based on our inspiration, which is a really cool thing to do. But I think what that requires is like living not too far ahead, as in, like, I'm trying to get somewhere. And when I get there, whatever this realization of this idea I had, that I'm going to be fulfilled. It's more like whatever inspiration I have sets the direction for where I'm going to go. But the whole thing is it. The whole part of the adventure is happening at every moment. So when you saw that thing to go to, was it Miami?
Yeah.
So you heard the ping of inspiration and then you
Yeah.
followed it. And then the 27 for the time was affirmation that that is the right direction. Right. But it's also like, you know, we're not really going anywhere other than the present moment. So just like if you're on Google Maps, it doesn't matter which direction you turn, you're always going to be rerouted back to the final destination, which is like pure Christ presence. That's another topic. But um, whatever path you choose to get there is your own,
Yeah.
you know? So it's just about what experience do you want to have on the journey? Like that's what we get to choose.
I feel Perspective Switch is my dharma, and I feel like it lights me up, and even when I doubt things, it lights me up. Like, even when I question everything, even when I'm scared, it lights me up, and I've never felt this way about anything in my entire life. But I also wanna say it was so hard for me to take the leap into it. I was so scared of mainly what other people were gonna think of me, and I still face that to this day, and, like, that was one of the hardest things for me to do, to quit my job, was because I had to tell everyone what I was gonna do next, and it's like, I have this podcast that I'm terrified of telling everyone about.
Yeah, I can totally relate. And I think that's the beauty of Ollie's course and going to these meetups because you see other people who are also just diving in and following their passions and their inspirations. And just like I said with Steven, like I had wanted to start a Substack for months. I had wanted to start a YouTube channel for years. And I didn't do
Yeah,
it until I was in a community of other people who were kind of working through the same areas of resistance.
yeah,
And we could kind of do it together. And you're like, okay, okay, let's do it. Like, let's be accountable to each other and keep moving forward. And, it's something I still experience
yeah,
is that resistance, but I appreciate the opportunity to break through it every day because it's not like you do it
mhm,
one time and then it's over, right?
no.
You have to do it every time.
Yeah, which is something that I'm coming to terms with, that for our entire life, we're n we're gonna have these experiences. Like, there is no perfect person, there is no perfect human, there is no, like, never feeling a negative emotion again. There is no facing, like, it's like our fears aren't just gonna be completely dissipate ever. And it's also beautiful to just accept that we're just living this human experience for these experiences to break through the fear, and to give ourselves that grace that sometimes we do get really vulnerable and scared. And this is what I've been experiencing recently. Like the past week was really, really hard for me. And I was crying a lot and I'm like scared. And I started reaching out to the people that I really trust in my life and like letting them know like exactly what I'm doing, but like also that like I'm doing it from my heart and they can feel that and they're so supportive, and like it gives them that opportunity to step up and to support me. And it honestly felt like such a good connection. Like I felt more connected to my friends in these places of vulnerability than when I'm like super strong and super sure of myself. It even got to the
Yeah,
point.
it's so important to do that. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, that really is, like, that is your dharma, right?
yeah,
So, the dharma is living from your heart,
yeah,
because perspective switch is the current expression of that, but, like, who knows how long you'll do it? Maybe a
yeah.
year, maybe 5 years, but I would imagine at some point in your life, you'll be inspired to express yourself in a different way, but, um, whether or not I think it is quote unquote successful is whether or not you have that feeling of like expansion and vulnerability when you're doing it, right? Whatever
Mhm.
that's whatever your edge is, like that's the
Yeah,
direction to go in.
yeah. Before we started this podcast today, I was feeling a little nervous, and I was remembering how that is a good thing. Because like,
Mm.
when I stop feeling nervous about what I'm doing, then am I really expanding and growing? And like you said, putting myself on the edge.
Do you normally feel nervous before you do these podcasts?
Most of them, yeah, a little
Mm.
bit.
That's cool. That's cool that you keep showing up.
It's really cool to like feel the fear of anything and then to do the thing anyway and realize that the fear didn't really have that much meaning.
Yeah, I think it does have meaning, and it's an indicator of the direction we should go in, actually. Like that's the
Ah,
meaning.
that's
It's a
interesting.
communication tool. It's like what you feel the resistance to face is the thing that's most important to face.
Wow, that's
And
so interesting.
yeah, and it's really the first step that's the hardest, right? Like the hardest part of getting to the gym is going to the gym.
Mhm.
But once you're at the gym, you're like, "Oh yeah, like I'm about to do this thing." But it's easy to when you're at home maybe make an excuse or be like, "I'll go later," or whatever. But once you have the inertia going, yeah, it's all good.
When I quit my job, I was terrified and my voice was shaking and I cried a little bit because I get so attached to the places I work for, and I feel like I'm like committed to them and I like owe them all this stuff. And so like I said, I was like crying and it was hard for me to express myself. And then once I got through that, I felt so empowered. And then I was like, "Ooh, like what else can I do to face my fear?" And
Right.
like it's just really empowering.
That discomfort is very normal, and we have a lot more resistance to it in the emotional and energetic and spiritual realms than we do in the physical realm, because like you wouldn't expect to go to the gym and not be sore afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Like the soreness is the proof that you went hard at the gym, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So all those experiences that you're talking about, like crying and feeling that tension and having to break through, it's the same thing as like ripping your muscles apart when you're lifting weights.
What was your first spiritual awakening like?
I remember, so I lived in San Francisco for a decade from 2007 to 2017. And when I first got there, coming from Atlanta, I was just like kind of blown away by the scale of it and like all the opportunities to party and meet people and like live the California dream that I had seen in movies and television and stuff. So I just did a lot of that. for the first few years. But in 2011, I believe I started this storytelling project called Souls of San Francisco, and it was inspired by humans in New York. So I would like walk around and like take pictures and meet people and share their stories. And I started learning so much from people, and I started having all these synchronistic experiences where I would like see a person on one side of town and stop them because they intrigued me, and they would tell me something about themselves, but was also like very much applicable to what I was experiencing and would feel very personal. And then the next day I'd be in like another part of town and I would see them again and be like, what the fuck? What is this person doing here? I've never seen them in my 4 years. And now I see them back to back days on like opposite ends of the city. Like that doesn't seem normal. But
Yeah.
the intensity and the frequency of those synchronicities started increasing. And then also, like, so I would take these people's picture and then, like, back then I would record. Well, I started out not recording the conversations, but then I started recording the conversations with my iPhone and then transcribing them and making the story that way. So there was all these major epiphanies. Like before I recorded them, I was just writing down what I thought they had said, right? And
Mhm.
then when I started recording them, I was writing down mostly what they actually said. Like I would cut out parts and make it a bit of a story, but I was like, wow, what they actually said and what I thought they said wasn't that close, So I was like, well, I mean, that was only a few hours ago that I talked to this person. And if my recollection of what they said was that far from what they said, like how are the rest of my interactions with everybody in my life,
Wow.
so that was like a big, I was like, whoa, and then also when I was editing the pictures, and since it's called Souls of San Francisco and now Souls of Society, like the focal point of the picture was the person's eyes, like the window to the soul. So when I was staring at these people's eyes over and over again, I started to feel and become more connected to the underlying energy that was animating all of the people. So it was like I felt this familiarity with like the one universal soul, and I could feel that it was one being almost like playing a game with me, like a masked ball, behind all these different faces that was communicating to me, right? And it communicates to everybody. It's not like I'm the only person, but the level of realization you have to that energy that I'm talking about is like purely based on the level of presence that you show up with. So, just like that was something I came to understand over walking the streets for literally for years doing that and just slowly becoming more conscious, just through the conversations and the interactions and the intimacy. Just from that project alone, I mean, I talked to 1,000 people, thousands of people on the street doing that project, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And then from when I started to like year 3, it like grew pretty slowly and incrementally. So from when I started to then, maybe around 5,000 people were following the project online. And then in the summer of year 3, I traveled from San Francisco and went to like Atlanta, New York, Rio, Istanbul, and Berlin. And like the project blew up when I did that because I was like hitting all these different places and telling all these stories and for whatever reason. So just the things that you get invited to do when you're doing something like that, like people are just
Mhm.
like, oh, like come to this party, or I dated people that I met on the street, so it's like each one of those things is a wormhole, and the project went from 5,000 to 150,000 in that summer, right? So then it used to be like a few hundred people would like a post, but then now it was like thousands of people would like a post and be commenting on it. And people were just in their own universe because
Yeah.
people receive things in totally different ways, like
Mhm.
Some people might be really offended by some story for some reason, and other people might tag their friend and have an inside joke, and then they start a whole thread that doesn't make sense to anybody else, right?
Yeah.
Um, and some people would be like criticizing me for who I was selecting to talk to or like the questions I was asking them. And then other people would DM me and want to tell me their life story because they saw me as someone who was open, you
Yeah.
know? So there's just like a
Wow.
million fractals from those things. And yeah, there's just so many like crazy stories that happen and so many people that I got to meet. And that's why, like, to this day, it's like very easy for me to create a connection with someone quickly because like I've like done it thousands of times. So
Mhm.
intuitively, I can just like drop in with people, like regardless of who they are, because I ultimately see them as being the same. You know, like when I was stopping people on the street, and a lot of times when people try to stop you or talk to you on the street, it's because they want something and want money, or they want you to sign up for something, or like,
Yeah.
but I wasn't coming from that space. I was just like, I was usually stopping people that intrigued me in some way, you know? So I'd be like nice snakeskin boots,
Yeah.
right? And then I just smile and give them an opportunity to kind of like look at me and feel out my energy and decide like whether or not they want to talk to me or not. But most people are friendly despite what the mainstream news would have you believe. Most
Mhm.
people are like pretty cool, you know? So like they'll just
Yeah.
be like, thanks. You know, like I got him last time I was in Austin, you know, doing this. And I'd be like, no way, I was just in Austin for this thing. And then like the conversation flows very organically, right? And then maybe they invite you to be on their podcast, and then here we are.
I feel the same with this podcast is I'm getting to meet so many more people and I'm getting to have deeper conversations and I get to ask people literally anything.
Right.
And it's an experience that I would have never had if I didn't have this podcast.
How
And
long
I
have you been
also
doing it?
I started my YouTube channel a year ago, but I've gone all in on podcasting in November.
Okay.
And I know that the more I do this, the more people I'll meet and well, obviously, and like even like in like bigger spaces. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love podcasting because like I'm really into the one-on-one, like deeper conversations. I used to really enjoy walking the street, and sometimes I'll still do that at an event, but energetically, it's just a lot of energy to take in. Whereas this is like we're coming here at a certain time. I know it's just going to be me and you, kind of like dropping in for a certain amount of
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
and that feels much more sustainable, and just like better for my nervous system at this point in my life.
yeah,
It took me a
definitely.
few years to decompress from all that walking the street, but yeah, it's a great way to network and to be vulnerable and to share and connect. I love it. So I'm glad that you're loving it.
I did one. It was like one of those you walk around in public and ask people questions. I did one of those videos and I asked people if you could say one message to every person in this world, what would you say? And that day was so much fun, but I also had my friend recording me and we just have such good energy together, so we were just having a blast. But I've like thought about like I want to do that again, but it is so much energy and I know that like I have to keep my energy up and be super social and I'm actually pretty introverted most of the time.
Right.
But it's so fun to get out and to meet people and another thing too is that when I asked people that question, it kind of gave them that chance to like go deep down and like say something really thought provoking or like live with more love or be more understanding. And I think that that like initiates that person to think about those things more, whereas they probably wouldn't have thought about it if I didn't ask them that day.
100%. You know, you have a lot of power with the intention you have behind like the direction you're setting the conversation in.
Yeah.
Even like perspective switch, like there's a very clear intention behind the podcast perspective switch, right? It could
Yeah.
be like this goes back to the death culture thing. Like the most popular podcasts are like true crime stuff.
Yeah.
And they're
People
like,
love that.
oh, this person murdered these people. And you're just like, okay, but why is that like the most popular thing that people want to learn about? Right. Like perspective switch for me seems like the coolest thing to learn about all the different ways people can approach situations that could potentially change your whole life,
Mhm.
for the better. Like that seems really cool to me.
The reason that I named this perspective switch is because my most profound experiences have come from, like, that instant perspective switch of, like, going from there's this one example I do use a lot. I was in Ocean Beach and I was just like having a great time, great evening. There was this homeless guy behind me and he was saying something and I was just like in this really happy like, oh, ha ha ha, laughing at him. And then like instantly my perspective switched and I realized that he was serious about something he was saying and it was like, oh shit, like I shouldn't fuck with this guy. He's not in the same vibration that I am. And
Mhm.
I remember that so specifically because it was literally like day to night of like, oh, everything's good to like, oh wait, oh, I should be a little more cautious. And like I truly believe that we can just switch into another perspective of like a perspective of love or we could be like in a perspective of fear and it just completely filters how we see everything now and how we've seen our entire lives in the past and in the future. It just fascinates me. And I think it's something so valuable for people to like really know and to know that there is that opportunity for them to easily switch perspectives.
Mm.
And then I'm sorry, I'm just like talking because I love it so much. But like each person in this world has a different perspective too, which is like it blows my mind. We're all seeing this world differently.
Right. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It's very well put, very eloquent. And I think what you're really talking about is empathy, right? Because what you
Yeah.
were doing at first when you were laughing was you were in your own experience, but then you
Yeah.
also were like, well, this human is in his own experience and it's not the same as mine. So
Yeah.
let me like sit in his experience, right? And that's takes a certain level of vulnerability. And I feel like we're lacking that a lot, or we could use more of it, especially in America, right? Like we have a very bipolar consciousness where people have like diametrically opposed differing views of the world. Like half the things that
Mm,
happen, one half of the country is like, no, that's not real. Like that's
mm,
not happening. And you're like,
yeah,
well, it is for me, right? And to
yeah,
understand that someone else's reality is just as real to them as yours is to you. So how can we have empathy for another perspective that maybe contrast our own and still coexist? That's a big
yeah.
question today.
That also reminds me of something else is how I can be pretty skeptical. And so like when people are sharing their spiritual experiences, there's a lot of me that like questions like is are you really having that experience? But what I realized recently is that I can validate when I validate their experience for like they're truly feeling this. Like I don't know if it's real or if it's not real or if you're like whatever it is, but this is their actual experience and this is how they're expressing it. And as soon as I was able to validate their experiences, I was able to validate mine on a deeper level.
That's beautiful.
I love that we're talking about validating other people's experience no matter what it is because it's so easy to deny their experience if we've never experienced it or if it's just not in our reality right now in this moment.
Yeah, and validating someone's experience doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means that you acknowledge that that's actually their experience. It's like a
Yeah.
very simple example I would say is like, and it's maybe the time when people are like most attentive to someone else's experience is in if you're in the car, right? If you're driving in the car and you're hot or something or whatever, and you turn the air on, and then a couple minutes later, someone closes the vent in the passenger seat. And you're like, oh, are you cold? Right.
Mhm.
So you may still be hot, right?
Yeah.
But you can at least acknowledge that they at that point are cold. So you can be in the same environment and be having different experiences, and you can acknowledge their experience. You can say, oh, like, I'll turn it down a little bit. Or I can, like, it doesn't have to be blowing so hard. Or you can close that other vent too. You
Mhm.
try to be like sensitive to whatever that person's experience it is while also still having your experience.
So you mentioned to me that you like making spirituality fun. What are some ways that people can have more fun with spirituality?
Well, one, just recognizing that life is supposed to be fun. Like,
Yeah.
it literally is. Like, we're here to have fun. Like, fun is a high frequency, it's a light frequency. Like, when you see a kid playing and laughing, that's beyond explanation. Like, nobody needs to explain that to you. It just makes you smile, right? And that's
Yeah.
like our natural state. It's just that, like, lightness and curiosity. And if you recognize that, then even when you're quote unquote doing deep work or shadow work, you can start to explore how you can make it fun. So, for instance, with Dharma Glow, we do an event called the Glow Up. And on the one hand, it's an event where people are doing like a good amount of internal work to heal and raise their frequency. But what we're actually doing is, like, let's say we have intention setting at the beginning, right? And then the cacao ceremony, we speak our intentions over the cacao, which is like a type of ritual. And then after that, maybe we do some yoga together or some form of movement. And then after that, maybe some breath work, and then maybe some sound healing. And then like a vendor's market where we're patronizing each other, small businesses. And then we eat a meal together, right? And then we listen to some conscious music that has intentional uplifting messaging, because that's how you program your subconscious, is like by what you're listening to, especially if it's melodic and you listen to it a lot. So if people were by themselves, they're probably not going to spend a full 10 hours doing all of those things in a row. But when you have this event that is intentionally geared to step by step elevate your frequency, by the time the concert hits at the end and people are having this ecstatic release, and the artists that are performing have also been doing all of the things with them, right? Like, they've been there doing all of those things, and you're all celebrating together. It's a completely different experience than like just paying to go somewhere, getting some beers with your friend, which is lowers your vibration, and then being a spectator to something, right?
Mm,
It's
yeah.
like you're co-creating an experience where everyone is working through their stuff collectively, and then celebrating in the co-creation of that energetic experience as a group, as a community. So that's one of the ways I'm talking about, like, making spiritual growth fun. We
Yeah.
also do like I have 50 silent disco headphones that are high quality. So we do like silent disco yoga like in the park. So you get the benefits of negative ions by being in nature and having your feet in the grass, but you also get to listen to really cool music, and the teacher is speaking directly into your ear. So it's like everybody that has the headphones and is there is tuned in to a certain frequency, right? So it's kind of a metaphor for life in general, because how we choose to see the world is the frequency that we're living at. So you can choose to turn into a certain frequency and cultivate your frequency. And like all the things I mentioned, and radiant rising rituals, or you going to the gym, is like choosing a certain frequency. So we all have agency to do that for our own lives.
What do you do when you don't feel embodied in love, but you want to be?
I think I try to take my mind off of it. Like, sometimes I'll do something intentionally, like listen to a meditation on an insight timer, or try to do some breath work like box breath or something like that. But sometimes it's just like change your environment, think about something else, go for a walk, try to get out in the sun, brush my teeth and floss and take a shower, you know? Just like
Brushing
something
up.
to move away from like the existential kind of energy and just like bring my focus to like the right here and now.
Yeah.
Playing keyboard sometimes that can like help me get out of my mind and get into like a kind of a timeless
Mm.
feeling.
Yeah, that reminds me of dancing
Dancing,
because
that's a great
sometimes
one.
yeah, I can when I start dancing and I get into a flow, it just it brings me into that moment and it, like, brings up my energy because I'm exercising as well.
Yeah, sometimes you got to wrestle with it and sometimes you got to leave it and just play.
Yeah. If you could send a text message to every person in this world, what would it say?
You're exactly where you need to be. You're doing a really good job and it's safe to trust yourself.
I love that question because when I ask people and they respond, I'm just like, I'm taking it in. I'm like, this message is for me, like, yes. Trust is such trust is like it's definitely has been really challenging for me in my life, but I also feel like the more that I live, the more that I trust myself.
That's beautiful. I mean, I think that's the way it should be. It's part of the maturation process, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end this podcast?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity to come on here and connect with you. And I appreciate that you're doing something that means so much to you and showing up to it in the way that you are. And for anybody out there in the perspective switch community, if the things I was saying were resonating with you, then you can reach me on IG. On it's at Dharma Glow, DHARMAGLOW. The Substack I mentioned is just my name dot Substack. So Dijon Bowden dot Substack, and I can send you the link to put in the show notes maybe. But
Yes.
that's where I like to share a lot of different types of things I'm learning, things I'm expressing. So yeah, those are probably the main things. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.